Welcome to the Pulpit and Porch. I'm Tony Marr, and with me as always is my friend Robert Kell.
Hey everybody, we are so glad you're here. The Pulpit and Porch is where we kick back, put up our feet, and have real conversations about life, faith, growth, and maybe even a little sports and pop culture.
If you're looking for a perfectly polished sermon, you're probably in the wrong place.
Yeah, around here, it's more about those honest, heart-to-heart conversations, like the one you'd have on a front porch with good friends. Sometimes we stay on track, sometimes we take the scenic route.
And honestly, that's half the fun, isn't it? We dig into the highs, the lows, and all the in-betweens of living out your faith in real life. Along the way, we may pull up a few extra chairs and invite some friends onto the porch to share stories and ideas that just may change the way that you see things.
So whether you're chasing your purpose, building your faith, or just trying to live a little more fully, pull up a chair, grab some sweet tea, and join us. This is the Pulpit and Porch. We got a seat waiting for you.
I'm staring down 50 years old, and I'm feeling every bit of it this morning.
And you're like 3 years behind me. So I will be 50 later this year. And we both did the same thing at different places yesterday. You did it for an hour longer, but I don't know that it was easy either way.
Yeah, and so yesterday, before I went and played basketball for 2 hours that I wasn't planning on doing with 9 high school varsity basketball players.
Well, seven high
school varsity basketball players.
One high school baseball player, one high school soccer player.
But before that, I had my 6 a.m. workout, and it was legs and ab day yesterday. And so I was already walking into the gym praying, hoping that we would have 10 show up so that I wouldn't have to play, and so that I could just sit there and be a quiet observer. And we had 9 show up.
I've got to come out with you guys one day. My struggle would be, I told Melissa yesterday, we were sitting at the house, and one of my knees is starting to give me a little more trouble than it should. So I've got to start doing a couple of exercises and some things to try and strengthen that up. But I said, if I could run like track, once I get going, I'm fine. And like I can run and
lube
run
up a little bit, those joints.
But like if basketball is a very start-stop game. It's like short track racing, not long track racing. And so in NASCAR, not running track, but like, short track is stop, go, stop, go, stop, go. Long tracks, you just kind of get out there and you just run, and super speedway things. And like, I can't, every time it's like a train it's like, I'm going slim. Like once I get going, it's there. And really it's been something that I don't know if I did something to it, and I just need to get a brace on it, let it heal up and do some things. But it was a month or so ago. Did we talk about this on here? Like I played so well that day. Like I was being double teamed. I have not had a day like that since I was probably 25.
And then you went home and thought NBA free agency is opening up.
Look, I may need to get my name out there. There's teams that are looking for some people. And the problem is at 6'4", I can play post. At the league I'm in, at 6'4", I'm barely a guard.
You're a guard in the NBA.
Yeah. And so I'm almost on, and I'm definitely on the bench.
Barkley was like 6'4". Draymond Green is not much taller than you. And right now, Draymond stands to be the Warriors 5 next year. So there's some hope for you.
Draymond's a different animal. He's got a little Dennis Rodman in him, but like then the next day I went out, I literally overshot the goal on my first shot of the game by 10 feet. I mean, not joking. I almost shot it out. I was in one corner and I almost shot it out of bounds in the other corner.
Wow.
It took a lot of skill to have
lifting
donuts. The curling donuts one at a time. But it took a lot of skill to go from, we played a 21, scoring probably 12 to 15 of the points in every game we played, to airballing a shot 12 feet past the goal. So I feel that pain that you're in, and I'd love to tell you it gets better, but
I run on the treadmill and outside sometimes when the weather's decent, and going linear, I can do really well. Just going straight ahead, I can run really well, but lateral movement, man, my knees are done. So.
Yeah. If I can just keep going, give me a track, I can run circles. Great. Once I get going, I'm good.
Try to cut anything like that.
Yeah, but if I've got to stop and talk to somebody and start again, I'm out. So
people say that you break ankles. Man, I leave knees and they're mine. I try to cut and there goes me. My knee is left back over there. So
So you said you like running outside in good weather.
Yeah.
Like I'm intrigued to hear because you hate winter.
Hate winter.
You don't complain. I don't know that I've ever heard you complain about hot weather in the summer.
No, I don't like the humidity, but I actually really enjoy the heat.
It's more humid here than it is in Vegas, I would assume.
0% humidity in Vegas.
Yeah. So you don't mind the heat. And so like you've got about 2 months a year, one in the spring, one in the fall, where the humidity's still low and the temperatures are rising, that you're like, this is perfect weather. So 10 months out of the year, you're relatively miserable here.
Yeah. When I first moved here as an 18-year-old college freshman, had never lived anywhere but Las Vegas and a brief stint in Orange County, California. I moved out here to East Tennessee, and it's mid-August, when you check into dorms as a freshman. And I was sweating so bad that I couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. I was taking 3-4 showers a day and changing my clothes 2-3 times a day. And finally, after about 2 weeks, I thought that I'd picked up like some foreign parasite from here. And so I went to the doctor on campus. They have a medical facility. And so I went to the doctor and I explained my symptoms and everything. And the doctor did some, blood pressure and pulse and all of that. And after a thorough physical examination that took about 5-6 minutes or so, the doctor said, "Tony, I know what's wrong with you." And I said, "What's that?" And she said, it's humidity. And I'd never heard that word before from where I was from. So I looked at her and said, "Is it fatal? Can it be cured?" I'm still trying to find a cure for this humidity. And so far it's air conditioning. Just stay inside.
That is the cure for sure. I tell you, it has gotten really muggy really quick here. And it's just one of those things that like you get outside and you're going, hey, this isn't terrible. And you're mowing the yard or you're just walking to your car for 10 feet or something like that. And you're going, it is miserable. It is so, your back's wet.
Yeah. When you could drink the air with a straw, that's a problem.
I don't know about a problem, but I've just always been in the South. I love the South.
I've never understood how you check the weather app and it says 100% humidity. If it's 100% humidity, shouldn't it be raining? Never quite grasped that.
Yeah, so it's a very, very different world. Hey, we had a lot of fun. And by now people have heard doing an episode with our wives.
We did. That was a lot of fun. And we had coast to coast reactions on that episode. Awesome. Heard from people clear on the West Coast, heard from people down south that everyone really seemed to like that episode. So maybe they just don't like us and they liked our wives. They do a better job than we do.
Maybe they gave a little more like raw view of everything. Maybe they called us out on some of our stuff that we don't realize and things, but it was good. It was one of those things I was telling you, and I think editing fixes a lot of this, and I'm sure when you're doing that, it does. But it was hard because this is like we talk, and our wives will talk. It's not like they're quiet beings that just never say a word.
My wife loves to talk.
Melissa's more quiet, like by nature, but there's things she wants to talk about. She will talk about them, and like all the time. But we both were trying to, so they weren't not apprehensive to talk, but just didn't want to overstep and didn't do. And so there was some moments where we were kind of like sitting here going, y'all can go ahead now. But it was so much fun and they were a hoot and the conversation was really, really good.
It was. And if you haven't listened to that episode, I think that we called it Hot Takes and Hills That We Die On. So aired a couple weeks ago. Go back and listen to that one. If you're new to the show, we want to welcome you to the Pulpit and Porch, and that might be a great episode to start with, or maybe not, because then you'll be disappointed in all the rest of the episodes. When I was going back and editing that episode, listening to it back, the one thing that really hit me is that I came across as quite the curmudgeon. And
was that a word? Is that the word I used?
That's the word you used about eight times.
You were, and you might be. I am a grumpy old man. I know that.
Yeah, I'm thinking that I'm becoming more curmudgeonous in my old age.
Yeah, I'm really bad to do that. I'm bad to get a word in, and then I just can't get it out of my rhythm of talking. in something like this. I think I do pretty well in sermons because you and I write sermons very differently. I write a script. I mean, like you could, like for the most part, if I spoke 52 Sundays a year, 50 of those, somebody could take my notes and just stand up there and read it. And if they were a good reader and like had emotion in their reading,
like in the high reading group,
not that, I can read, but they're an expressive reader and they can portray emotion. If they could read it twice during the worship set before they walked on stage, they could read my sermon and you know, and if they could speak like me, they'd be fine. But like that would be like I don't. But in these types of conversations where I'm just talking, I'm so bad to get on a word and just keep using it. I'm going, I don't know how to stop. It's a lot like Ted Lasso when he's trying to figure out how to say words and he gets them and he keeps saying the word over and over and over and it gets into his brain. It's
I've never seen Ted Lasso. That's been well established on this show.
I'm just telling you, we talk about things like that and it's like if you've given it a try and don't like it, I can get this. But
I don't have Apple TV, so that's the issue. I did that like a year ago because the Dodgers were on Sunday Night Baseball, and or Friday Night Baseball, whatever it is that Apple TV does, even though I have MLB Extra Innings or League Pass, whatever the subscription is, when it's on Apple TV, I don't black it out. Yeah. So I did that 7-day free pass to get a game about a year or so ago. I need to just do it with a different email, I guess.
So here that'd be hard because you have to, well, maybe not. It used to be hard.
Use your Apple ID.
Yeah. And it used to be hard. Maybe it wouldn't be as hard anymore. But so here's one of my grumpy old man things. I'm so over all the streaming services. Like we were sitting down last night and trying to watch, like my middle son, all my kids like soccer, but my middle son is a soccer guy. And so we're watching Gold Cup. We're watching the World Club.
Le Football.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're watching the World Club soccer thing. I can't remember all the names of all these things. So many tournaments, but, there's this new, and I don't know how to even say it, DAZN, is it DAZN? I don't know, but it's a streaming service. I'm not saying new, like it came out last week, but it's been out a couple years at least. And they have a contract with a lot of sports stuff. We do Hulu Live TV. We've done most of the streaming things. We did DirecTV Stream. We've done YouTube TV. We've gone without it for a lot of seasons of life. And we're local to the Braves and the Reds are the two teams that are our local region here. And my family's a Braves fan. And we used to could get on through whatever live TV thing we were doing. You could pay and get Sports South. That. Yeah. So, yeah. And now it's on, the gambling. It's one of those gambling sites.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
And I'll think of it here in a minute, but you could get Bally and all these things. And now it's on FanDuel. And so now FanDuel is, and it's a totally separate streaming. And I'm like, I love sports and baseball and all the things, but I'm just like, I can't just continue to pay for more streaming services every time somebody gets one. Like for you to pay for Apple TV to watch 3 Dodgers games would be, I mean, now you're a touch fanatical, but like you could also,
but I'm also very cheap.
You could also just call me and we could just order pizza and wings and sit at the house and watch Dodgers, because I would do that to hang out with you. And so
you would put yourself through that.
I actually just like baseball, and I still like Freddie. I love watching Shohei play. Mookie Betts is probably my favorite Dodger right now. I just like him as a player, and he's fun. I like when his podcast comes up in my reels. I'm not going to listen to his podcast every week, but I like when his segments pop up. So I like Mookie. There's a couple players that have very punchable faces on your team that most teams have those. Just like with OKC, the Thunder in the finals, the Chet, the really tall guy,
Chet Holmgren,
and then the dude with the bandana or the headband.
Alex Caruso.
Yeah, they both just have very punchable faces to me. I just like,
you couldn't reach Chet to punch him even at 6'4".
I'd have to stand on Caruso's shoulders to get him in the face. But yeah, like I'm that's my grumpy old man. I'm tired of all the streaming services. Somehow we've got to streamline this stuff. And
how many different streaming services do you pay for?
That's let me see. I guess technically we do pay for them. So we have the Hulu bundle. So that's Disney, ESPN Plus, and Hulu. And then we have live TV with that, which saves some money. 7.
Wow.
We have Paramount, Peacock, Apple TV. Apple TV comes because I pay for Apple instead of Microsoft Word. So we get all of our storage and things inside of that instead of Microsoft Word. And so it comes as a part of the Apple family pack. We do Apple Music, not Spotify, things like that. And so that one, I mean, some of those things kind of come inside of some things like that. We've got Paramount, Peacock, Netflix, Hulu, Disney, ESPN Plus, and kind of going through. I think that's the only ones. And then like I pay T-Mobile, people get my MLB pass for free with their phones, and people sell that for $10 or $15. And so I'll buy an MLB pass for $10 a year. But yeah, and we really use between sports because Peacock, Paramount have soccer, Apple TV has baseball, Paramount has football, so does Peacock. And so we could cut off a couple of them probably, but we use the vast majority of them pretty regularly.
Wow.
Just with sports and TV shows and things like that. Every time I threaten to cut one off, I was like, that's what my show's on. 6 weeks later, they're not watching that show anymore. I'm like, I'm about to start, like, that's going to be, you start paying rent through streaming services.
Yeah.
But anywho, but it would make me very lonely. And that is what we're talking about today.
Lonely at the top.
Run my kids out of the house over streaming services. I'd be lonely. So my wife would be mad. So.
And you'd have nothing to watch.
I'd have nothing to watch. They'd be gone. I have nothing to watch, and I'd be all by myself.
So today we're talking about leadership and how leadership can oftentimes be lonely. That loneliness is a byproduct of leadership, especially if you're doing leadership well. Then I think you're going to have moments that it feels like you're lonely. So we'll just dive right into this. I think this is a subject that hopefully will strike a chord. I think that it's going to be universal because I think that we're all leaders in some area of our lives. If you're a parent, you're a leader. If you're a spouse, you're a leader. Maybe not everyone leads a multi-employee company or business, but we all lead in some capacity. How well we do that and what level of leadership we're at varies from person to person. But if you're listening to this show, then I'm going to venture to say that you lead in some aspect in your life. And so, Robert, why do you think that leadership can so often feel lonely?
Well, I said this to you right before the show. I think that as people are listening to this, there's two parts, and you alluded to this. There's this kind of real clear break of, are you lonely because of isolation, or are you alone because you're on a mission to change the world? Because those are two very, very different things. And I think that you've got to evaluate that. And I have been lonely for both of those reasons. And I don't necessarily love either one of them because I get really, really, really caught up in I love community. I love people. I'm like a party waiting to happen. I just like enjoy sitting and talking with people, enjoy watching games together and being in places and moments where those things are there. And so that to me is something that's really, really complicated. And I think as you're listening, are you lonely because of isolation? You've removed yourself from people, from community, from spaces, or are you lonely because you're trying to change the world and you're wanting to do something really, really big?
But by its definition, leadership means that you're leading the ship, right? And so that by nature puts you out in front. And when you're out in front of people, there's often less company there. And so I think just by its very nature, leadership causes you in some ways to be privy to loneliness. Also in leadership, that you're given information, burdens that often can't be shared with other people within your organization. Decisions that you have to make in leadership can isolate you from the people that you're leading, who can't necessarily see the full picture of what's going on. And so there's a natural disposition in leadership to being alone. Yeah, but as we'll talk about later, there's a difference between loneliness and being alone.
Yeah. And I mean, like something I tell people when they have these conversations and they're like, man, I just want to be more connected to my staff, or I want to do this, or I want to do this. And things kind of get down a path and you start to go. And I'm like, look, somebody's going to get fired if things go poorly. And that is you. And that is the leader. That is the person. You are the person who will go down if this doesn't go well. I was listening to sports radio this morning, and they're talking about people in sports right now who have the most weight on them. And the conversation, like you think about Lamar Jackson, you think about, tall guy with the Sixers that stays hurt right now.
Joel
basketball.
Embiid.
You think about Embiid, and they listed 4 or 5. Aaron Judge was on that list of like, hey, these are guys on the hot seat.
I would say Rob Pelinka is on the hottest seat of anyone right now, general manager of the Lakers, because they're not doing anything in free agency.
They didn't mention him, but the person they did mention was Kyle Shanahan. And they're like, if he, and
that surprises me.
Yeah. I mean, because that's just the thing. At the end of the day, we may not be on national TV being talked about by, like talking heads of these people who all they have to do every day is wake up and go, what's the hot take? What's the button I can push? But at the end of the day, we are the hot seat for that board of directors, that deacon team, that group of people that it is in their control to make sure that the organization is moving in what they think is best. And that's the tension a lot of times. And I was listening to a reel, just getting ready for this. And, guy's name was Dr. Miles Monroe. I hadn't heard of him before. He may be crazy popular and I just never heard of him, but he said exactly what you said. Loneliness is this byproduct of leadership. And he said, and the tension around that is that people either want you to be like them or to be them. People want us as leaders to have the same character traits that they have. It kind of goes back to that, like, love your neighbors, you love yourself. And people are like, that means like you should love them the way they want to be loved. And it's like, that's not really how that works out and what that means. And we get to this place as leaders where we kind of have to step in and go, man, loneliness, as we've said already, is this result of building something. To build something or to lead something, great, you will be alone, at least at the beginning. And then every vision has one true believer in the beginning. And I thought that was like one of the coolest things he said in talking about this is every vision. And if our vision, like inside of the church, is to be disciples that make disciples, inside of an organization is to change, enter your mission statement here, the thing that's deep inside of your core, you are the only true believer when that thing starts. And it is in the isolation, it is in the loneliness that you develop at its core level the thing that God is calling you to. And as you become, and I'm not saying be your true self or anything like that, but like as you fall into that vision, you become the person God is shaping you into, the right people will be attracted to that. And I think that's been one of the biggest struggles that I've noticed in my life. So I loved that clip. I mean, that guy was amazing.
What was his name again?
His name's Dr. Miles, Myles Monroe. And it was an incredible clip. It was kind of, I don't know, for a reel, it was kind of lengthy, like 2 or 3 minutes, but it was just a really good conversation. Trying to see what else he said there. I typed in a bunch of stuff. What attracts people to you is that when they realize you don't care if you're lonely, you're still going to pursue the vision. Like people will be attracted to you when they realize you don't care if you're lonely. You're not going to just sacrifice what you're being called to go sit with them and do nothing.
So basically what he's saying is leadership is standing alone long enough to bring others along.
Bring the right people
along.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing is in something that I kind of like, I just want people around. And I think I have sacrificed, sabotaged, and broken things throughout my life because I just wanted people and I didn't understand what it meant to get the right people. And so like being lonely may not be a bad thing. And there's some other stuff.
It's the whole good to great. Get the right
goodness.
People in the right seat on the bus before you can get it going.
And I think those types of things are there. I think another tension for me is like when you ask the question, like, why does leadership often feel lonely? You and I are, we're close enough to the same age, but we were brought up in very different parts of the world. And so I don't know in the South around where I was. And I was brought up this way, and I heard some guys talking this morning about this, but I was brought up in a world where you don't share your struggles from like the pulpit. You don't share your struggles as a pastor with other people. And I heard this group, Misfit Preachers, on one of their reels say that they were taught that kind of same thought in seminary. You don't share your struggles from the pulpit because your people need someone to look up to. And they kind of, with a few choice words, I won't repeat those here, but they quickly said that's the worst advice you can give anyone. But that's what pastors have been taught.
Yeah.
And when you live in isolation, you're going to be lonely.
Yeah. I think that I've told this story on this show before, but it's been a while, that I have always been very open from the stage, very authentic in that, and tried to really share my struggles and areas that I'm in conflict with myself and with God and with everything else. And I had one time that one of my core leaders, probably my key leader, in fact, he was the chairman of my elders, say after a particular message that he wanted to take me to coffee that week. And we went to coffee that morning, and he said, "You've got to stop." And he said exactly what you just said. He said, "You've got to stop being so vulnerable in your messages, in your sermons." He said, "Because these people need someone to look up to, and you're humanizing yourself is doing the opposite of that." And I just looked at him and said, "Then I think maybe you're at the wrong church, because I'm not changing that."
Yeah, you're the wrong church, or I am, because this is who I am. And I see that's a thing. And Tony, I think that thinking leads pastors to be lonely in the wrong way, to be isolated in the wrong way. Because I get it. Like, you don't need to stand up and share every deep, dark secret on stage. But like, if you start to feel, man, I can't talk to anyone, I can't share anything. And that's the tension for me, is I think I grew up in a world where I don't know that I thought that pastors had problems. And I just think that, and what it trained me to do was to preach like them, which was to point out everyone else's problems in the world. Sometimes people in the community, sometimes even you'd see them almost point out people who had just left the church or something like that, or bigger things. It's easy to kind of go. I mean, this past Sunday when I was preaching, I was like, hey, power. When leaders get power, they start to think they're uncontrollable. I talked about Richard Nixon and Tiger Woods and Julius Caesar and Napoleon Bonaparte, Lance Armstrong. I mean, you talk about that. I mean, like those are the people that people know, and you do that to go, oh, that's a struggle I understand. I remember when Tiger Woods wrecked his vehicle, and because his wife was beating it with a 9-iron. I remember when Lance Armstrong got shut down because of the performance-enhancing drugs and what was going on. Most of us might not be quite as aware of Et tu, Brute with Julius Caesar, or, we might not be quite as aware of Napoleon Bonaparte. And you might go, I kind of know Watergate, but I don't really understand everything that happened with Richard Nixon. And I'm not saying I'm a perfect historian on all of those, but people go, oh, I understand that. But there has to be a level of authenticity of going, hey, I need you to know that I am sitting in this muck mess junk with you, and God's working in me in my life in this way because here's something he's done this week or this year or in my lifetime.
Well, I think the other thing that happens when you are raised and practice in the environment that you were saying is that 3 months in, 4 months in, a week in to your ministry, when you don't have it all together, you think, what's wrong with me? I guess I'm not qualified.
No, that's good.
Have you ever led something and felt like there was nobody that understood the weight that you were carrying?
I think the thing I would say is that I think this is a fair assessment for most jobs. Unless you've done something like you don't really have a full understanding of what's happening. I mean, I think there's always a moment where you do something and that people don't fully understand because they're not the leader. Like, I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
I think ministry is unique where people are relying on you. for not just physical or like emotional support, but spiritual, family counseling, career advice, and so much more. I think it feels a little more like it feels a little different ministry. And I'm not saying that's not the case. Like, I listen to really, really, really good leaders who have businesses that care for their staff and teams the way that we're talking about, that pastors care for members of a church. But I think that's there. Like, what about you? How do you?
Oh, absolutely. I think anyone in leadership would say yes to that. For me, it's especially in crisis or conflict, because it's in those moments that you feel like you're making the best decision possible, right? You've thought through it. You've sought counsel, hopefully, not always, but in big decisions, hopefully. And so I don't think that anyone in leadership makes a decision that they don't think is the best decision possible. But when you're in that leadership position and you're making decisions based on the information that you have that you think are going to be the best decision for your organization and your people, it's still going to hurt people and invite criticism to come along. And so it's in those moments that you feel like you guys just don't understand what it's like to sit in my chair. You guys don't understand what it's like to be in my place or position. And it can feel very lonely.
How do you, can I ask a question here? How do you balance that a little bit? Because the thing I was just thinking about is that, like, as a leader, when you get a little bit isolated, you get a little bit on that island by yourself. And I'm talking a lot from church perspective, but I've also led in other organizations and been able to sit in some spaces. But like, you get on a space where you feel like you're kind of on an island, and you make the best decision you can, but that doesn't necessarily make it the best decision because you're making it inside of just the echo chamber that you are, and you don't have that there. How do you? Because you're like, you make the best decision, but how do you do that when you're in a space where you're in a season where it's very, very lonely where you are, and maybe you've got yourself on an island? Maybe that's something you've done, or maybe it's just something that happened, and you're trying to figure out how to make decisions in that space. How do you do that when you're on an island?
Well, first I would say that I think that decisions do isolate you from people that can't see the full picture. And that's part of leadership, that you, hopefully from your leadership perspective, can see the whole picture of what's happening. People that you're leading often can't see that full picture. And so because of the decisions that you have to make, they're going to isolate you from those people that can't see the full picture. We'll get into this a lot later on in this episode in talking about how do we protect ourselves from some of this. But I think the key is to surround yourself with people that maybe don't see the full picture of your organization, but they can see beyond the walls of your organization. So they have the view from 30,000 feet. And so they can see some of the things that maybe from your box that you've created in isolating yourself, that they can see beyond those walls, that are not the people that are not privy to the full view because of their position within the organization or the family or whatever that is. And so having other people around that are not directly connected to that organization that can, or, outside of your family, outside of, whatever you're leading, that can give you some unbiased perspective from 30,000 feet.
That's a really, really, really good thought. And because I'm just going, like, the tension might be for anyone listening is they're feeling really, really disconnected from other people in their organization, other people in their life. They're feeling very alone right now. And they've got a big looming decision that's coming up that they know they've got to make, but they don't feel like they have anybody that's in their corner. Anybody that if they share, like, hey, I'm struggling between option A, B, and C, and here's the pros cons list, or however you break those things down for your team inside of that, and you're working through that with them. Because I mean, like, I've been in spots where there's like been really, really great people, and I've been in spots where those great people 6 months later try and take your job. And it's just something where you start to give the wrong people too much trust, and there's a way to lead them, like, to where they don't get into the inner circle, but you start to give the wrong people too much trust, and they will take things and kind of turn it against you. And so maybe there's a situation like that. Maybe it's just the staff is in a sense of turnover. It's a new team, and they're sitting by themselves. And I just think that sometimes when you're sitting in those spots and you're on your own, I think you're making the best decision you can, and it comes a little bit in isolation, but it doesn't necessarily have to mean that it's coming in a bad way. I think we have to remember that God's faithful, and that can't be our journey forever, but it can be our journey in a season that God works through some stuff. And I think if we're faithful to in prayer, like you and I were talking earlier about something, you're like, hey, my prayer life has been more active this week because of A, B, and C. And, and we work through things and we pray through things and we're reading the scriptures and we're letting God work through these moments in scripture that we get to read where we see people face some situations that we go, okay, I may not be in the same boat as Daniel was, but God, you worked this way then. How do you want to work in my life now? How do you want to do? And the Holy Spirit is moving and active and doing. And I think that's something that's a really big deal. So
what's the difference between being in charge and carrying the burden?
This may be a flaw in my leadership. When I read this question, the first thing that really came to my brain was, I feel like being in charge is carrying the burden. And I think that, like, I tried to even break down as I was working through this. I think you can attend a church or work at a business and have a punch in, punch out mentality. If you're the boss and have that mentality, you won't be the boss for long. But if you're in charge, I think part of the burden of leadership is carrying the burden of the organization and the people. And you don't have to carry it alone, but I do think and like I said, maybe this is a brokenness in my leadership, and it might be something that I'm trying to grow through now, or I've been in a process of growing in it for 30 years. But that's been a tension for me, and I feel like I broke your brain.
Yeah, I just disagree with you on it.
And that's fine. And I'm saying, like, I
know a lot of people that are in charge of stuff that are not leaders. And so I think that being in charge is a title, carrying a burden is a calling. I think being in charge gives you authority. Carrying a burden gives you sleepless nights. And so I definitely think there's a difference. Anyone can carry a title.
No, absolutely.
Only a few can carry a burden.
And I guess what I'm saying is, like, I've never been able to disassociate the two. That, like, if I'm the leader, the boss in charge, however, like, if I'm the leader to oversee it, I've always felt like there was a burden to carry, because there's a mission to complete. There's a mission statement. There's a vision statement. There's values that need to be done. There are people to care for.
But there are different levels of leadership, as we said at the beginning. Not everyone listening to this show is a CEO. Not everyone listening to the show is a lead pastor. And so there are different levels of leadership. And I think that there are oftentimes people that are put in charge of something that they don't feel the weight of the burden because it's just simply a title to them.
Well, and I don't know if I've ever said this on here, but I've told you, like, I think when I became a CEO, I realized I'm not a CEO. I'm a step below that. I am a great second chair. If you will lead me, if you will have a conversation with me, if you will jump in and I can show up and be there with you, and you'll just, like, let me run alongside you, I'm a great second chair. I think in certain spaces I'm pretty good, but I'm not the lead. I may be the lead at my campus, but there is a slew of people who are over me inside of our network. And I love, like, the level I'm in. I get a lot of investment. I get to share my thoughts. Those thoughts get heard. They don't always get taken, but that works in my space and in my world. And it's the chair that I lead best from. And I am thankful for that. And so that's just, like, some understanding. But, like, for me, and so, like, maybe go back to my semantics word from, like, 6 podcasts ago when we were arguing semantics. But maybe it's a wording thing. I just don't, like, I don't disagree. I think that there are leaders who just have a title and they show up and they punch in, punch out, and they do their thing. They bully people around or whatever it is they do. I mean, I'm not saying all leaders are bullies if they don't have, but if you're leading and you're not carrying the burden, if you aren't really passionate about the mission, vision, and values,
then it's just a title.
It really is a title.
Yeah.
And I think for me, maybe that's what I'm trying to say. Like, I think that being in charge is being the leader is carrying the burden. I don't think you have a choice. And so I've always had that space, but, so maybe, like I said, maybe my wording was poor, but like, I think at the core of it, we both agree on that thought is that, man, if you're going to take on something, you got to be passionate about what it is.
Yeah, I agree.
Like you and I listened to a podcast and you shared it with me, and the podcast itself, we don't like, it's not something I've listened to another episode or two. I don't know if you even have. We listened to this guy interview Tim Tebow.
Yeah, I've listened to several episodes. I think he has great guests.
And when you get into Tim Tebow, like you could not do what Tim does if you didn't have a burden inside, regardless of how much resource he has, how much, fame and notoriety and things like that he has. The core level, Tim could be a nobody to the vast majority of the world, and he would still be doing the things he's doing because he is so passionate and burdened for the things of God, for the people of God, or the people of this world, to lead them towards a relationship with Jesus. So, yeah.
Good stuff.
You ever felt like you couldn't fully share your struggles as a leader?
Absolutely.
And we both kind of stepped on this earlier.
Yeah, I would say often you feel that way because you're trying to protect other people within the organization. You're trying to protect them from fears. You're trying to protect them from confusion. You're trying to protect them from discouragement. And so, yeah, absolutely. There have been times, and it's in those moments when I felt like I couldn't share my struggles as a leader that I realized that I was in an unhealthy place and I needed to find people outside of that I could share them with. And so, yeah, I've been in that place very often. You want to protect the people that you're leading. And oftentimes you think that if you're struggling, I went through when I was lead pastor of a church, and as lead pastor of a church, our church was doing great. We were growing tremendously. And in the midst of all this, I went through a divorce. And in any healthy situation, I should have taken a step away from leadership. But I can remember my associate pastor saying to me, if you step away for any prolonged period of time, we're all going to lose our jobs. That people are going to start coming or stop coming. And to me, that put a burden on me that I was like, I have to just fight through this. I have to just, for not deal with everything that I'm going through. And I mean, I took a week off is all I did. I took a week off and then was right back in the pulpit, right back in leadership, and felt like I couldn't talk about any of those fears, any of those frustrations, any of the hurt, any of the confusion with anybody associated with the church at all. My staff needed to feel confident that I was still in a place to lead them. My leadership, I feel like I couldn't let them know what was going on, or my livelihood, my job might be in jeopardy. Definitely the people in my church, I felt like now more than ever, it completely changed the way that I taught from the stage, because I now needed to give off the sense that I still was in control, that everything was still good. And so this continued on for a while, and I got to a place where I said, this is so unhealthy that I have to have someone that I can talk to about what I'm feeling, what I'm going through, what I'm experiencing emotionally, spiritually, mentally, because I didn't feel like I could do that within the people that I was leading.
So I don't want to get too far down this path. This could be like an episode later, but you said something there that really resonated with the last conversation we had. The last question we were kind of working through, when you said, I felt a responsibility to carry the burden of making sure everyone else was okay. And that is to, okay. So that in that word, and looking at the two things we said, when I said, I feel like leadership is carrying the burden, and you're like, man, I don't know if I agree with that. And I'm going, well, I'm viewing burden under the lens of mission, vision, values, passion, of like, I care about where this organization is going. where I would agree with you 100% is that wasn't your burden to carry. Like that was like, yes, there's a level of you should inside of mission, vision, values, passion, like you're leading people, you should have a concern for them. But that burden in that moment, I sat with a friend recently and he said, we were working through some things in our life and we hadn't been tithing. And we felt God calling us to be faithful in generosity and tithing again. And I was like, that's incredible. And he said, so we were praying through some things. And my wife was in a situation with her job. She was trying to transfer from one department to another inside of the same company. And they were like, hey, you know, this. They did an evaluation. She got a ton of really, really good reviews, called her back an hour later and fired her from everything, like nothing. And so they had been praying, God, we want to do this. Give us some clarity. And he said, literally, Robert, like she was talking, got a good review. She's like, I'm feeling uneasy about something. And he's like, we were both working from home. I rolled my desk chair over to her desk. We held hands and I prayed for her. Roll back over and 20 minutes later, she gets fired. And I told him in that moment, and we're sitting in a restaurant and both of us tears in our eyes. And I said, I love moments when we ask, I said, I hate them personally, but I love this for you. This is way easier. And I told him, I was sitting there, I said, this is way easier for me to preach to you and say to you and encourage you with than it is to live in my own life. And we both laughed because that is the truth. It's very much easier for me to preach things on stage than it is to live them in my own life. So, because I'm growing just like everybody else. But I said, I love moments that we ask God for something and he meets that need exactly in the space that we ask him. But he says, I actually have a lot more for you. And so you're not going to understand. And I think it was incredibly unfair and short-sighted. And I don't know all the details. I'm talking about this very, like maybe unwisely. But just from what I know and things you've said, it was unfair. And it left your staff kind of in a space of they didn't get to see what God maybe really wanted to do for them in a season of you getting 2 months off, that you're out, a sabbatical, that you get to kind of reset. And because that who knows, it could have changed the course of your life forever. I mean, in a way different way. You may still be at that church. You and I might not know each other. I mean, there could be a billion different things that could have come out of this and kind of gone. And I think that's like a unique thing is sometimes we look at stuff and we want someone else to carry a burden because it's easier for them to carry a burden than us to trust that God may have something he's wanting to do in our life. And if we'll take a season of just trusting that we can follow the leader, that God will work and do. And so I think that those two caveats on burden is really something that's incredibly
Now, I
heavy.
do think that it's important to say that I do think there's wisdom and discretion.
Sure.
That, like you said earlier, you can't just in leadership be completely vulnerable and open with all of your struggles and all of your concerns and all of your frustrations.
Yeah.
There is wisdom in discernment, but there's, as you said, there's danger in completely isolating yourself from everyone.
Yeah.
You don't have to share everything, but you shouldn't carry everything alone.
I agree. And I think that we've got to have people who are deep enough in our life, and it's not many, it's one or two that are deep enough in our life that they have the freedom to ask some questions, that they have the freedom to see our bank account, they have the freedom to see some things in our life that they can hold us accountable to. Hey, you say you want to be here. Gary Vaynerchuk says, match your aspirations to your mouth. And I'm just like, you've got to have people in your life that are willing to say, aspiration, what you're saying, you know, like you got to have somebody who's really calling you out on those types of things.
So we talked about this a little bit earlier. What's the difference between being alone and being lonely?
I think that, like I said, we've talked about this some, just kind of at a base level. I think being alone feels intentional. Like we've moved ourselves away, and
Kobe just broke into the studio.
Yeah, we are no longer lonely. We have one of the 3 show dogs that have joined us today.
I think that's it, though. I mean, honestly, I think what just happened is a perfect example of that. That being alone is a physical state. Being lonely is an emotional and spiritual state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. lonely sometimes just feels like you want friends and you just can't get in the
You can
loop.
be in a crowded room
Yeah.
and feel completely unseen as a leader.
And I think that's how I feel a lot in my life is I have a couple of people and I'm in rooms and I'm a pretty extroverted person. And when I'm in a room, there's a ton of energy and I'm super excited to be there. And I just think it's incredibly hard and complicated to really develop deep relationships.
Yeah, when we talk
level.
about the loneliness of leadership, loneliness isn't a lack of people, right? Because if you're in leadership, again, as we said, you're leading. So you've got people. Loneliness isn't a lack of people. Loneliness is a lack of being known, a lack of being seen, being understood.
Yeah.
Why don't we talk about this more?
I think that I've heard it said, and I have said so many times, like, if you want to have friends, show yourself friendly. But I think that's just I understand the theological side of that. And so I get it. But like, I also think that we just don't know how to talk about this topic. I think there's things that we are learning to navigate. And a little bit of it, I think, has been a shift in culture that's happening crazy fast. I mean, you've got to think about like 20 years ago, we barely had the internet. Was there any social media 20 years ago? MySpace might have been around 20 years ago. Yeah, it would have been because
man, we're old. Yeah, 20 years ago, MySpace would have been around. Facebook coming.
But Facebook was kind of right there. I know, like, I created a Facebook when Landon was 3 or 4 years old, and it had been out a little bit, like not long, but a little while. And then I remember like jumping onto Twitter within the first 2 days of it being out, and that was in like 708. Something like that. We're 20 some years from these. From those types of things, and I think we've isolated. It's just not a lot of time to figure things out.
Do you think there's a social stigma in leadership that admitting this feels like weakness?
I do, and I think it goes back to what we said, that people need someone to look up to. But only your heroes fall at the same time, and so if we aren't genuine about some things. Like, I just, like, there's people. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think there really used to be a cultural myth that strong leaders don't need support, but I think that's changing. I would think it used to be 20 years ago. If you said that you went to a counselor, you were looked at, ooh, what's wrong with you? Do you need to be committed into a mental hospital? And now everyone's got their therapist on speed dial, usually number 2 or 3 on speed dial. And so I think that that's changing some in secular society, where I would say I don't know that it's changing as rapidly, if maybe at all, as within the church. Because I think that within the church, I think that oftentimes the church values, I need to think of how to say this. I think that the church often values self-sacrifice more than self-awareness.
Sorry, I know we're not supposed to be quiet on the air, but like, that wasn't a note. I'm trying to process that live. And it might be the best statement you've ever made.
Especially out of our leadership.
Yeah, I'll tell you this. The vast majority of people that I have led, regardless of what type of organization, and I've been in them all, not all organizations I've been in. I've done nothing politically. But I've been in a lot of different, what I was trying to say there.
We've created a culture.
Most people don't care about where I land. They care about themselves.
We've created a culture where you can burn out in silence and still be applauded.
Mm-hmm. And then they murder you on social media when that burnout becomes
public.
Yeah. And you're either weak or
when that burnout becomes loud, when it removes itself from the silence and becomes loud, noisy, messy.
When it's weak, when it's a failure, something like that. And look, maybe it is. Maybe as a failure, there's some things we need to be called out on and things like that. But or maybe, what should happen is the 3 or 4 people that are close in our circle should call us out. And we should sit in some counseling and things. And the last thing we probably really need is a bunch of keyboard warriors out there going, I know more. Like, I saw something. We've got a restaurant locally that had to close because of staffing this week. And inside of that, they said, if you want to buy a business, and I don't know, I don't think they were joking, but if they're like, if you want to buy a business, reach out to so-and-so at this number. And and somebody jumped in and just kind of said, not really that good authentic food, not really that good or authentic food anyway. So what's the loss? And they literally,
Wow.
they went in, the business commented and said, thanks for rubbing salt in the wound. And I just think that's the tension, is that we just don't, like, we are such keyboard warriors, and used to, you had to be like 70 years old and lived a bunch of life, and people are like, old Tommy, he just says what's on his mind. Well, he used to, didn't. He says what's on his mind because he's retired. He's like 80 years old, and he's just tired of like little kids acting stupid. So he just says a bunch of random stuff that maybe he's nice, maybe he's not. But that's kind of the world that we live in. And I think that's the tension, is like, now we have people who are 16. I saw a bill get passed the other day that for teenagers in the state of Tennessee, I think it's something that started July 1st, that if you are caught bullying, you can potentially lose your license for a year. And I think that's the whole thing, is just we've gotten so comfortable trashing people online that loneliness is the necessity to get away from the crazy. And so we just don't want to talk about it, because that's how people are self-healing. But I don't know that we were designed to self-heal as much as we were designed to live in community and to encourage and help each other.
All right. So here's the dilemma that we're facing right now. In this episode, we have 5 segments that we've planned for.
And we're an hour in.
And we just finished segment 1. So a lot of the podcasts that you and I listen to, the one that you just mentioned, if I could speak correctly, that might answer our question.
Those episodes are like 3.5 hours
some
long.
Of them
sometimes
6 hours sometimes. So we need to take a commercial break and hear from our show sponsor here. When we come back, we can either just keep on going through this and make this like a 3-hour episode, or we can call wraps on this week and pick this up with the next segment next week. As we hear from this, you can think about what you want to do with that.
Empowering leaders, enriching lives. That's the heart of Higher Ministry. They're dedicated to equipping Christian leaders with the tools and resources they need to thrive in their calling. Whether you're looking for leadership development, strategic planning, or community outreach strategies, Higher Ministries is here to help. Visit higherministries.com to learn more and thank them for sponsoring our podcast.
All right, so we made the decision that we're going to call wraps on this episode. We've got places to go, people to see, and things to do. And so we will pick up this conversation on loneliness and leadership next week. We hope that you've enjoyed part 1 of what may turn out to be a multi-part episode. And we would love to hear your thoughts. You can find us on Facebook. You can find the Pulpit and Porch on Instagram. And you can find us on the World Wide Web at higherministries.com. We do want to thank our ministry sponsor, higherministries.com. Without them, this show wouldn't be possible. We want to encourage you, wherever you're listening to the Pulpit and Porch, be that on Spotify, Apple Music like Robert, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you're listening, hit that subscribe button. That helps us more than you could ever possibly know. By you subscribing, other people can find our show and be encouraged by the words that we've said. Again, so like, subscribe, follow, be a part of the conversation, and we'll pick this conversation up against next week. Have a great rest of your day.